I'm letting the cam ops know. "907 looks great."
Yeah, he's a big guy. Very
Yeah.
856 like in his
Yeah, I know.
face
The
and
ears.
ears.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, at first, when I first saw him before, I thought that was 856 on the lip. And I said, no, 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 that can't be.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he's a big guy. It's amazing how fast they grow up.
Yeah.
This will give me a chance to look up his life history. I know he's thought to be a Amelia child. Um, let's see.
Someone over by the fish ladder, probably a younger bear. Something with YouTube? Is that the issue?
Maybe it might be fixed. We might be live right now. I'm just waiting for confirmation.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, it looks like we're good to go. So thanks for everyone's patience if you've stuck with us so far. Good on you. We're running almost 10 minutes behind. My name is Mike Fitz with explorer.org. We're talking brown bears and salmon here at Brooks River in Katmai National Park. And my co-host for today's play-by-play on August 1 is the one and only Naomi Boak with the Katmai Conservancy. Naomi, how are you?
I'm very well. We had a little rehearsal here while we were not live. So
Right. Yeah,
ready to rock.
we were talking for like 5 minutes before we realized we weren't actually streaming to the internet. That was good practice. Where I think maybe we'll skip over some of the things that we do at the beginning of our broadcast just because we're running behind on time. There's a lot to talk about today. We do want to get to the bear activity at the falls, narrate what we're seeing live as far as salmon activity, bear activity, the interactions between the different bears. We want to give everyone some updates on the bears as well. Naomi, it looks like we were talking right before we found out we were live. We were talking about the big guy up on the lip of the waterfall that I think is 907, and he's a bear that we've seen growing a lot over the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, at first, I mean, he has ears that look like 856, and when we first looked at the camera, I thought, "Oh, that's 856." No, no, 856 couldn't be on the lip of the falls, but he's been catching fish after fish, and and there is 909 moving into position, and to show you how big 907 is, when she's on the lip of the falls alone, she looks huge because she's been very successful. That's her spot. She's really fat, but look at the size difference between the two of them.
And those two bears are about the same age. So I can't remember the exact years that they came back to the river as spring cubs. We have a really, I think, a good idea that both of these bears were raised here along the river. And then when they were separated from their mothers, as part of that normal separation process, they came back as independent bears, and they've been using the river ever since. But yeah, you can see how with adult females like 909, she's had one litter of cubs so far, but females really, their growth rate really slows down once they reach reproductive age and they start caring for cubs, because raising cubs is just so energetically intensive. It just takes a lot out of mom, so much energy needed to raise a cub. But males, on the other hand, they have kind of different things to worry about. such as competing for mating opportunities. So if you have the genetics to grow big, that's going to help you in those situations. And it's one reason why the adult males grow so much bigger than the females. But 909, pretty expert on the lip of the falls. 907, Naomi. Um, yeah, he's a jacuzzi bear sometimes. Sometimes we'll see him in that plunge pool below the falls, but right now it looks like maybe
Mm-hmm.
that position is not available to him.
Yeah. But wherever he's been fishing, he's been doing well. And then there's 747.
Right, that's what I was kind of referring to. If he wanted the jacuzzi at this point in time, he wouldn't be able to access it because of the giant 747 that's down below. So, real dominant male in the plunge pool right now. And downstream of him on the right hand side, it looks like number 901, who's a young adult female. She's also had a single litter in past years, but she does not have cubs this year, and then a few bears on the far side of the waterfall. And lots of fish jumping, Naomi, today. So it's a good day. If you're a bear at Brooks River, it's probably a pretty good day for you because there's lots of food available.
Yeah, a little while earlier, there were a lot more bears, but I think they've gotten their fill.
That's quite common on days when there are a lot of fish in the water. You get your fill, you can go into the forest, kind of sleep off your meal, digest it. You don't need to hang out at the waterfall as much. So on those days when we're seeing, 24 bears or more fishing at Brooks Falls, that's usually a day when the salmon are a bit thinner. But yeah, tons of fish. Really great to see. This is part of the last great salmon run left on Earth, part of the Bristol Bay system. So Katmai National Park, the western half, the west slope of the Aleutian Range on the northern part of the Alaska Peninsula that includes Katmai is part of the Bristol Bay system. This year, another really big salmon run, really strong salmon run. And, it's amazing that, everything in this area is benefiting from the fish.
Yeah, I mean, it is really incredible. And of course, there's no fish count at this time. That's stopped. And we really never know. There's no fish count for the Brooks River at all. It's the Naknek watershed. So we just have to watch all the fish jumping and be happy with that, not look at the numbers.
Well, we've been seeing an interesting trend over the last 10 years or so where there's a lot of fish that are continuing to migrate through Brooks River in late July and early August. And that really wasn't a thing historically, as far as I know. So for some reason, the pattern of salmon migration in Brooks River is changing. I don't know if these fish are coming straight from the ocean or if they've been hanging out in Naknek Lake and just have delayed their upstream migration, but we're really not seeing as many fish like in early July, kind of moving upstream. It seems like a lot of the fish are starting to move upstream in late July or so. There was an audience question related to the amount of salmon in the river. Let me see if I can bring that up for everyone here once I happen to find it. So,
Mike, is that jingling your dog?
yes, that is not me. That's my dog being a little restless at this point in time, which is fine. But she is well fed tonight, so I'm not so sure why she needs to get up at this moment in time. But anyway, um, back to brown bears. Somebody was wondering, Love the Bears was wondering, I haven't seen many or any fish on the underwater cam lately. Are there fish in the lower river and we're just not seeing them on the camera? So again, yeah, big contrast to what we see up here at Brooks Falls. Bears, fish, pretty obvious what's going on there. You go to the underwater camera and you're not there. We have seen some salmon swimming by this today. There's been other fish species here as well, like whitefish, rainbow trout. There was an Arctic grayling on here, which is really cool to see. They're really interesting looking fish. I think, Naomi, that and neither of us have been at Brooks River personally this year, but I think maybe the river channel has shifted in the lower Brooks River, and more salmon are just kind of migrating upstream out of sight of our underwater camera. That's my hypothesis, at least.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that river channel changes greatly year to year.
Right.
And
Yeah.
also
So
the
I think
underwater camera gets pushed around sometimes too.
every once in a while a bear will decide, yeah, this is what I want to do with it. It's pretty well protected under there, but yeah, a bear sometimes does twist it so it looks, to the left or the right, maybe a bit uh, perpendicular to the stream current itself. That's my best guess to answer that question, is that the salmon are kind of using just a slightly different part of the river to migrate upstream. Back to live footage here at the falls. We have different cameras at our disposal. We haven't really talked about the falls low camera yet. We'll be going to there hopefully from time to time, depending on bear activity. That smudge in the middle that you see is from a bear. Naomi, you said that was from 806's cub recently.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
806
so
Junior, very curious little guy.
I'm a little surprised that the bears haven't ripped this camera off its mounting. It's really just a plywood box that's screwed together on the lower lower end of the one of the support beams for the viewing platform at the falls itself. Now rangers won't be able to get down to clean that camera until like the middle of August. August 16th would be like the earliest day that they can do it, because that area is closed to people right now. It's a seasonal closure. But that closure can be extended if bears are in the vicinity. So if a bear is like in the waterfall, or if there are bears fishing there consistently, I don't think rangers will get down on the ground to clean the camera. So we'll just have that happy memory of that bear smudging the camera. Downstream, the Riffles camera, about 100 yards downstream of the falls. Lots of activity happening here. Bears wandering through. We've been able to see 128 Graser and her cubs on this camera recently. That was not her. That was a different bear wandering through. And then we have camera operators, of course, looking at our lower river cameras. So the River Watch camera, searching right now diligently for any bears that happen to show up, and then also catch Riverview. We're hopeful that bears will show up in this location as well.
(909) going back to her position after finishing her salmon.
Yeah, and she's doing really well, Naomi. You can see how fat she is for this time of the year. So we talked about her just briefly on the last play-by-play, and if she comes back in September, we get some good September photos of her. I think she would be a strong candidate to win Fat Bear Week this year. And it's really, again, a contrast between her and the females that are raising cubs. You can really see sometimes a big difference in their body mass. The single females, they don't have to worry about cubs. They're not devoting energy to producing milk. They don't have to spend energy in so-called vigilance behavior, so they're not looking for dangers or threats to their cubs. They don't have to, be as alert in all situations. So again, all the energy that they can gather, all the fish they can eat, that's just going into their own body mass.
Yeah, and sometimes when they're watching out for their cubs, they don't get to fish in their preferred spots, which was the case for 909. When her cub was a spring cub, she really couldn't leave it, and it was her first litter, so she didn't quite know what to do, and she didn't get as fat. But when she doesn't have a cub, she is such a good lip fisher, like her mom, like her sister, and like their offspring now. So it's good to watch that family and the knowledge of lip fishing being passed down.
It really is a cultural tradition in a sense. Bears fishing for salmon in the way they do at Brooks River. Brown bears have an instinct to catch fish everywhere that they live. But here at Brooks River, the bears, again, have this food culture that is centered around salmon and other foods and the seasonality of it. So if you were to transplant a bear, like a grizzly bear from Yellowstone here, it probably could survive because it could find vegetation that it's familiar with to graze on, and the bears in Yellowstone, they eat a lot more vegetation than the bears in Katmai, but it wouldn't have the experience or the cultural knowledge to fish for salmon. So these in a sense, these are cultural traditions that the bears are passing down from mother to offspring over time.
So, Mike, I'm going to ask you a question. This is, we're seeing this at a distance, but to me, the salmon that are jumping now look a little smaller than the ones that were here earlier, a few weeks ago.
Well, it's real hard to tell, of course, through the cameras, but we know that this year the size, the average size of an individual salmon in the Bristol Bay sockeye run this year is smaller than ever measured. So, like, there was an interesting article we both read in Naomi on KDLG's website, which is the Bristol Bay NPR affiliate. So they do a lot of salmon fisheries coverage during the summertime, and they reported that this year in the commercial fishery out in Bristol Bay was 4.2 pounds, so smallest ever measured. It's not like smallest by pounds and pounds and pounds. It's incrementally smaller than the last year that they set a record, which was 2020. But over time, this is a long-term trend where the sockeye salmon seem to be getting smaller overall. No one really knows why. We know, though, that the fish that are coming back are younger than they were like 20 or 30 years ago on average. So instead of coming back after spending like 2 years in the ocean or excuse me, 3 years in the ocean, like more staying back after spending just 2 years in the ocean. And they're also spending less time in freshwater too. So it's almost like their life cycle is just sped up. No one's really sure why. Could be, again, they're just genetically selected for it because of environmental conditions. Some people also think that there's competition with increased numbers of pink salmon out in the ocean, and that pink salmon are doing really well sort of like naturally in a lot of places, but also because people are hatchery fish are being dumped into the North Pacific in record numbers, pink salmon, that is. So yeah, it's a bit of a mystery, but it was an interesting article in on the KDLG website if anyone wanted to check that out. But certainly a big change compared to what people experienced in the past, where the average size of a sockeye salmon would be more than 5 pounds in this area. So, and I used to say that I'd be like, "Hey, this is a 5 pound, salmon jumping at your face when you're on top of the falls." But I guess I can't say that anymore.
And no, I guess you can't. But it's interesting, and for, people who are not as familiar with Alaska, Alaska does not allow fish farming. So all the fish that are caught in Alaska are wild.
Yes, yeah, there are, I think, a few hatcheries in Alaska, but it's not the same as fish farming. So they're not restricted to pens or captivity their whole entire lives, which is different than what you might find in other places. So if you're buying an Atlantic salmon, that's almost guaranteed to be a farmed fish. But yeah, if you're buying a fish from Alaska, it's going to be a wild fish. 747 now, moving to the far side of Brooks River. We kind of saw, if you were paying attention to the footage of the bears while we were talking about the fish, how one of the bears kind of moved, or both of the bears that were maybe on the far side kind of moved to give 747 space. He's kind of like parting the Red Seas here because he is such a big dominant bear. I think that's number 820 on the far side. He's a bear that we don't really see coming towards the camera side of the river. I think that's my best guess is that he maybe just doesn't like the presence of people on that side of the river, and some bears just never get used to that. So he sticks to the far side. 747 though, we'll see him in the jacuzzi. We'll see him on the far side of the falls as well. But he's one of those bears that's big enough to generally go where he pleases, Naomi. We don't really see him having to worry about rivals, except for maybe just one this summer.
Yes, just 32 chunk. But yeah, the bears do react to the people who are on the platform, which is where the camera is. And when 747 is in the jacuzzi, he will look over to the platform to the people, but will continue fishing. He's not disturbed by it. But there are a number of bears who won't come closer to the platform. 820, 89 backpacks, another one of those. And 89 backpack doesn't like the bridge either. And there are a number of bears who don't like the bridge, don't like to go under it where people are.
Yeah, it's quite a diverse mix of personalities and dispositions at Brooks River, and we talk about this all the time. But it's one of the things that makes bear watching at Brooks River so fascinating. So we get to know these bears as individuals. They're not anonymous bears wandering across the landscape where you go and you're like, oh, that's really cool, that's a bear, and then you take a few photos and you kind of move on. We get to see how these bears behave with one another, how they interact with one another. We get to learn about their life history, how they tolerate each other, if they're cranky or if they're feeling playful or tolerant. We get to see their moods almost from on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, they do differ as individuals. And I once was talking to a television producer I had known many years ago, and I was telling him about the bears. He said, "Oh yeah, if you've seen one bear, you've seen them all." And I just laughed and said, "Well, I'm going to stop
Did
talking
you
bears
scoff
to
at
this
them, or did you like grab them like stereotypically like a slapstick comedy, like, and just be like, get a hold of yourself, man, and just slap them across?
guy." No, I just decided he was hopeless and
Okay,
stopped talking to him.
all right. So that's
Well,
yeah, that's
747.
that's Naomi's line in the sand, I guess. But yeah, Naomi, you were saying 747 climbing the hill.
Yeah, he can still do it. He's not reached his ultimate fatness. He can still climb the hill.
We'll see these bears rapidly gaining body mass at this time of the year. So early summer, they're going to start to regain fat too in early summer. But really, uh, in early summer, the body mass that they're gaining isn't necessarily fat. A lot of it is like protein and lean mass. And then later in the summer, that's really when their bodies seem to focus on sequestering body fat itself. And that can be it's really and that depends on the diet though. Salmon really give bears fat and protein, so it's a really a wonderful food for them. If they later in the year when they start to eat berries and they combine a berry diet with a salmon diet, that's the ultimate bear meal. Really, it provides them with sugar, fat, and protein in highly digestible form. So bears grow faster, get fatter, gain more muscle mass on a combination of berries and salmon than maybe more than anything else.
So, do they gain more fat later in the season? Is that partially due? Oh, well, 909 just high graded. My question is the gaining more fat towards the end of the season partially because of hormonal changes?
I don't know if it's about hormones necessarily, but maybe the amount of or the types of foods that they're eating. Because if you're a smaller bear, let's say you're a 4-year-old bear, you're not really that big, you can't compete for fishing spots up at Brooks Falls because you're just it's just a hard place for you to gain access to. But you're eating vegetation. The vegetation can be pretty high in protein. It's not the most digestible thing, but it can be pretty high in protein for you. So that you can't really turn that protein into fat really easily, like you could if you were eating like the salmon roe or salmon brains or salmon skin. But later in the year, there's going to be more salmon available to the bears, so they're going to be able to scavenge, the spawning and spawned out salmon, and then the berries because they're so rich in sugar. Mammal bodies seem to be really good at converting sugar into fat. But Naomi, we know that the bears are going to start to feel that sort of that hormonal change that triggers hyperphagia in them when they can't they can't eat enough. They never feel full. I don't know if that affects their ability to to gain body fat versus like lean protein or not.
Good question for our bear biologists.
Yes. Let's head down river here because we have a family. We haven't had a family on our cameras yet during our broadcast today. This looks like number 504 and her giant cubs. So these are fourth summer cubs. And this is an odd year for in that respect because I've only known one family to have fourth year cubs at Brooks River prior to this year, and then now we have 3 or 4. So I'm not sure why, but some mothers didn't separate from their cubs in the spring like expected, and now we have these big gangs of bears roaming the river.
Yeah, I mean, some of them are just so big. Um, they don't look like a sow and cubs. They look like three adult bears together. That cub getting some scraps.
And these cubs are at this age. I mean, often brown bears are independent by this age, so it's going to benefit them to be under mother's care and guidance for another year. For mom, it reduces her lifetime reproductive output. So it's going to delay her ability to have cubs. She's not going to have cubs this winter because female bears don't mate, they don't copulate when they're caring for offspring. So she'll likely separate from them next year, and she'll be single next summer, have the opportunity to mate. And so the earliest that she would come back with cubs would be 2026. But for the cubs, I mean, this is probably great. Hey, this is another year with mom. She will give me protection. She'll give me guidance. I can grow, I can gain more body mass probably in this way. I experience a higher level of dominance because I'm with mother, and the three of us sort of are more intimidating to other bears. So yeah, it's I think it's a good deal for the fourth year bears.
Yeah. So, Mike, speaking of fourth year bears, you had a clip of Graser with her former cubs who are now independent.
Yeah, let's show that. There was a highlight that we wanted to talk about during the broadcast today. So let's cut away from live footage right now. We'll go to a clip from, let's see, when was this? Yeah, this was just yesterday. So number 128 Grazers, the one on the lip of the falls with the very blonde ears, sitting down. And there's a bunch of other bears on the lip of the falls as well. Another family actually behind Graser, sort of on the far side of her left side. But then she's flanked actually by two of her former cubs. Graser has a litter this year, but they're not. Those spring cubs aren't on the lip of the falls with her right now. But the two that flank her, you see right now on either side, left and right, those are those are bears from her last litter, and it's like we're back in 2021 again. Like she just let that her cub just take part of that fish.
It's amazing tolerance for bears that that she's booted out a year ago. Um, so interesting.
We get questions every once in a while, like, do mother bears recognize their former offspring and vice versa? And I'm convinced that they do. We've seen enough anecdotal evidence of behaviors between mother bears and their cubs that suggests they do. They're not always nice to their former cubs. We've seen Graser actually shove one or both of these subadult bears that are her former cubs off of the falls. Like last year, I know that happened. So,
Right.
I think it may just depend on her mood, how well fed she is that day. Graser, low hanging belly, so she's doing well for herself this year overall. But yeah, that was really interesting to see. I don't think she would have let most or any other bears really do that without at least a swat to the side of the neck or the shoulders or the face or something like that. So yeah, really interesting
Yeah.
behavior from Graser. And as an example,
Yeah.
we can look at another pair of fourth year cubs on the lip of the falls. Graser to the right of them. These are 482 Brett's cubs, I think, and one of them really wants some of the fish from Graser. Now Graser is doing a better job protecting what's left of her salmon in this instant, but we'll see, Naomi, that she's not as forgiving in this situation.
Yeah. Brave little cub. Oops.
Yeah, it just
Mistake.
it was pushing the boundaries as much as it could get away with. Graser wanted to protect that fish. She was done. The cub had to make a move in that situation because it knew that the whatever leftovers were going to wash over the falls. So it had to take that chance, and it wasn't successful. But Graser, tolerated the bear there, for quite a long time before she decided to discipline it. I'm not sure where mom was in that instance, but she wasn't interested, I guess, in getting involved in the situation. Back to live footage right now. Thanks for joining us. If you're tuning in a little bit late, my name is Mike Fitz with explore.org. I am here with my co-host Naomi Boak with the Katmai Conservancy. We're talking about brown bears and salmon at Brooks Falls. Lots of fish in the
Mike,
water today. Yeah, go ahead, Naomi.
no, I was going to say, since we were talking about Graser, do we want to briefly talk about what we know and don't know about Graser's injured cub?
Yeah, let's talk about that right now. So that the behavior of the bears at the waterfall, where most of the activity is, seems to be fairly stable. So we'll get back to these bears in just a few minutes. But in the meantime, I know a lot of people are wondering about Graser and her cubs. She was around right before the broadcast, and unfortunately, she didn't stick around for us to watch and talk about live. But we do have a clip of her from, I think, earlier today, and her healthy cub. Naomi, real quick, do you just want to recap why Graser has been the focus of people's attention so much over the last few days?
Yeah, on Saturday afternoon, Graser and her cubs were above the falls, and they floated down off the falls, and one of them floated right into 32 Chunk, and Chunk attacked and severely injured that cub. Graser did fight for her cubs. She got 32 to let loose, and she continued to attack Chunk. The cubs swam to safety, and we've seen it on and off, walking on its hind legs, resting under the treehouse, which is a place between the Riffles platform and the Falls platform. But in the last day, we have not really seen the injured cub, but we just don't know what we don't see. We're not seeing everything. We just really don't know the status of that other cub, but we haven't seen it.
Yeah, so unfortunately, we can't really provide any more updates. We did ask Ranger Sarah Bruce if she'd heard anything from her colleagues out of Brooks Camp, and they haven't reported anything different than what the cameras have seen today. So Graser just with the single cub right now, the apparently healthy one. Don't know the status of the other one right now. It could just be stashed in the trees, but again, we really have no idea. Um, we ask, and appreciate everyone's patience with this situation, because we know that people are really eager for updates, but we'll try to get those updates to you through the Rangers. So yeah, we'll do our best to try to update those on a daily basis. And I know Ranger Sarah did update her comment in the main Brooks Falls comments on explore.org. So if you wanted to see what she said directly or replied to her, you can find it there. But yeah,
Yeah,
challenging situation for Graser, but she's one tough mother bear. She is, I think she's the archetypal mother bear, Naomi.
yeah, she is, and it's tough not to know, right? Frequently, we don't like there are bears this year that we haven't seen yet, and they're not here, and we just don't know, and so we just ask everyone to be patient. We can't confirm anything.
Yeah, that's one of the hardest things about the situation, is like that we don't have information. Can't go searching through the grass for an injured cub. Again, you get there, mother's nearby. That's a real dangerous situation. The area is there's a regulation that closes the area at Brooks Falls for people on the ground. So really, we can just see what we can see from the platforms or the webcams itself. So yeah, please be patient. We'll do our best to update people as best we can. Let's head down to the lower river, because we haven't checked in on. Either my internet froze
Lost
or the camera froze. Um,
your
uh,
internet froze.
okay. That's what I was wondering. Yeah, not one of our big, large adults scavenging salmon down here, but commonly, at this time of the year, Naomi, one of the younger bears, sometimes, often single females are down here. Subadult females are down here looking for anything they can't swim away.
And also with all the fish up at the falls right now, there are going to be a lot of scraps floating down.
Yeah, the bears up at the falls, they are facilitating, a lot of opportunities for bears downstream. So you get a bear, on the far side, high grading its fish, uh, eating the skin, eating the brains, eating the eggs, but leaving the fillets behind. There's going to be a bear downstream that's looking to scavenge that fish, whether it's way downstream at near the river mouth itself, or maybe it's in the riffles area. The salmon are quickly consumed by scavengers, bears, gulls, eagles, magpies, ravens, and then aquatic invertebrates are feeding on that as well. If a bear drags the salmon carcass up into the grass, then terrestrial insects are digesting it, bacteria as well, and that's spreading salmon nutrients throughout the ecosystem. So these fish are not only bundles of energy, but they are also fertilizer for the entire ecosystem, and helps enhance the productivity of the whole system.
There's some ears down there. Oh, no, it's a bird. It's good to see the bears getting salmon more easily this year than they did last year.
It did
It
look
was
like,
tough to fish.
right, yeah, it did look like the salmon run was lighter in Brooks River last year. And again, we don't have specific counts for the Brooks River area. The number of fish that went into the larger Naknek River watershed last year was actually greater, but it seems like, at least anecdotally, there's more fish that have gone into Brooks River this year. And that, again, that could just be like, hey, one age class of sockeye salmon that would normally come back in large numbers last year. Maybe they just had that generation just didn't do too well. That could have been it. That's my best guess anyway. But sockeye salmon, they have a pretty diverse life history, so they don't come back at like fixed ages. Like a pink salmon, for instance, is going to come back when it's only 2 years old. That's like all pink salmon. But sockeye salmon can come back from the ocean when they're 3 years old, or 4 years old, or sometimes 5 years old. So that we're not sure why. I wish we kind of knew, but yeah, that's kind of one of the recurrent themes of any of our bear cam broadcasts, Naomi, is the unknowns, and how much we
Yes,
don't know.
yes, the known unknowns. Um, it's last year was interesting because there seemed to be, you could see a lot of fish in the river, but the water level was high and there were not a lot of fish jumping the falls. So that made it a lot tougher for the bears to catch the fish that were there. But this year, a lot of fish jumping the falls, as we see tonight, and bears getting the product of that downriver. So, and the water level isn't as high. So it's a good year for salmon, good year for bears.
And I think that's maybe the 807 here, kind of closest to the camera in our view right now. There's a salmon near his feet, and you could see sort of how casually he reacted to it, not with like
Mm-hmm.
the desperation or the hunger of a bear with an empty stomach. And then, yeah, I think maybe this is 903 on the far side, kind of lunging and towards fish, high grading, eating only part of the fish. So again, both of these bears doing pretty well for themselves, and shedding out as well. So they're shedding a lot of their fur, which indicates that they have the energy to expend to do that. If bears haven't really started to shed their fur by this time of the year, that can indicate a little bit of nutritional stress, because if you're going to shed all of your fur at once, it can take a lot of energy to grow all that fur back. So sometimes, again, mothers with cubs, especially if they're nutritionally stressed, they're not going to shed their fur as early in the year as some of these single bears will.
And speaking of nutritionally stressed, do we want to talk about our oldest bear, Sarah?
Yeah, speaking of that, I don't know if we had any audience questions specifically about her, but Sarah is a really interesting story. And she's old, so she is close to 30 years of age. We don't know exactly how old she is, and it's sad to see bears like this. This is how they age, and this is often how they sort of succumb to the challenges of the environment. Sarah looking very thin here, hip bones protruding. You can see her shoulder hump. She hasn't is real big there, and that's not because of a lot of muscle there. I think that's because of her shoulder blades. She hasn't doesn't really look like she's shed a lot of her fur yet. So yeah, these tough situations to watch. I remember seeing Sarah when she was a much younger bear, raising cubs along Brooks River. But these are the hardships they face as older bears. And she was, to just give everyone an idea of how old she is, she was first identified at Brooks River in 2001, and she had cubs at that time. She had yearling cubs, actually. So she was probably, again, bears in Katmai, they begin to reproduce on average, after they're 5 years old. So if we say at minimum she was like 6 in 2001, yeah, then she's a pretty old bear right now. So yeah,
But
we
she
were,
made, I was gonna say she
sorry, go
made
ahead.
it back this year, right? I mean, it's pretty incredible. And but that's what happened when it's harder for them to maintain their weight. It's harder for them to fish. You see her, having a little trouble walking. She probably doesn't have a lot of teeth left, but she's back here.
Yeah, I mean, bears are so tough. They are survivors. They never really give up. But that when things are difficult for them, this is kind of like the progression that we see. We get to see these bears in their prime right now, like the like 909 who's eating the fish on the lip of the waterfall. We get to see 807, a growing young male on the near the boulder on the far side. 901 who's been catching fish. I think she's below the falls with a fish right now. We get to see these bears in the prime of their life, but we also get to see these older bears struggling to survive in this wild environment. Katmai protects these, the ability of bears of all ages to live their best lives and work as hard as they can to survive. But again, it can be really hard to see these older bears struggling at this age. One thing that Sarah has to her advantage, though, Naomi, and you mentioned that she survived through the hardest part of the year so far, which was springtime and early summer when there's not as much food available. Salmon are spreading throughout the watershed right now. They're going to be available in many places besides Brooks River. So she's going to have that opportunity to find salmon elsewhere, and she doesn't have to rely just on this spot. But there was an audience question related to older bears. Let me bring that up real quick before we depart from the topic of like older bears and Sarah. So Jennifer was wondering, when older bears expire, it seems like they just don't return for the new salmon season. Is there data that suggests when bears expire due to old age, they die during hibernation? I cannot remember reading any studies about bear mortality rates anywhere that really suggested that a lot of bears are dying during hibernation. I think if they kind of run out of body fat, they get through hibernation, then they come out of the den in the springtime being really skinny, and that's a time of the year that can be extraordinarily difficult for them. Or if they're not getting fat enough in the fall, then that's the time of the year maybe where they take more risks and they end up dying, especially in areas where bears and people utilize the same landscapes. So like in the Northern Rockies, for instance, that can be a significant source of grizzly bear mortality. You get an older grizzly bear, desperate for food, comes into someone's backyard looking for apples or something like that, or gets into someone's livestock, and that can be the end of the bear. Naomi, have you read anything uh, different than that? Maybe anything that does suggest that a lot of bears are dying during hibernation?
No, I think I feel the same way that you do. It's that there are those stressful times for an older bear just before hibernation and just after, especially just after hibernation. There's no food around. They've lost all that weight. Um, So, and yeah, a lot of bears, they don't come back to the Brooks River. We don't know if they've gone someplace else, or with older bears, maybe we can guess that they haven't gone someplace else if they've lived their lives here. But that springtime and late winter is a very, very challenging time for bears of any age.
And it's just not body fat either that makes a difference for them. Bears get sick from viruses and bacterial infections. They can get cancer. They can break a bone. Maybe it doesn't heal properly for them. We There's even been documentation over the last few years of bear cubs dying from avian flu. We know bear cubs can die from other respiratory viruses as well. So again, they're living a wild life in a wild place where it's very abundant, and that's why there are so many bears on Katmai's landscape. But at the same time, they do face a lot of challenges, and I think that knowing what the challenges that bears face and how hard it can be for them, I think that's all the more reason to sort of celebrate their success and how well they do.
Yeah. And speaking of success, 909. I mean, she is migrating like a fiend over there. She is like, well, I got this nice, really red meat salmon, but not so interested.
Yeah, we should have been keeping score because that's not her first fish during the broadcast
And
today. Hey,
I'm
real
sure
quick, let's
someone's
get to
keeping.
let's get to the underwater camera because I don't think we've ever talked about a grayling live during a play, but this is a grayling. These are members of the salmon family of fishes, but they're in a kind of a different corner of um, the salmon family. But they have a one big giant dorsal fin. So we just got a glimpse of that fish on the underwater camera, but it's been hanging out there every once in a while. So check in again. These fish, grayling, the whitefish. Um, there's a whitefish right now swimming by, one of two species in Katmai. They're also members of the um, salmon family, or salmon order. Yeah, these fish are going to start to get fat on salmon eggs real soon, and look for the rainbow trout too. They can be really abundant at, in Brooks River, and the Arctic char. They're going to be just gorging on salmon eggs. So we think about the most conspicuous I think benefactors of these rich salmon runs are the brown bears from the perspective of our webcams, but the fish are just they are just going to get fat on salmon eggs as well. Sometimes anglers will have told me, yeah, you can be at Brooks River and or elsewhere in Katmai in August or September, catch a grayling or a char or something like that, and you can see that its stomach is visibly swollen with food, and it's just all salmon eggs that they've been eating.
What? Yeah. And in Lake Brooks, there are a lot of trout and graylings and other kinds of fish. And one of our scientists told me that they found a trout that was 50 years old. Those
Oh,
those
really?
those fish are good life. Yeah,
Amazing.
yeah.
Naomi, there's one more clip I thought we wanted to talk about before our broadcast ends today. We started a little bit late, so we might run a couple of minutes long, but Uh, you want to talk about that? Let me bring up the audience question for everybody because bears in the lip of the falls. Just to set this question up, sometimes they do some quirky things, and people often wonder, like, what's the deal with that bear? So let me find that question for everybody here. We'll bring it up, and I'll bring up the clip. So the question comes from Stevie. Today on the cams, there's a darker adult bear and a lighter cub. The cub was making an occasional jerking motion with its head, like a bear version of what humans call ticks. Is this a normal behavior or a random behavior? So let me bring up the footage. Naomi, you think this is the footage of maybe what Stevie was referring to?
Yeah, I went. He very kindly told us the time that he saw this, and this is what at that time. It's not a cub; it's a subadult. But you see the head motion going up and down. To watch a little bit, and And so I would say this is not something wrong with the bear. This is kind of a normal behavior for bears on the lip of the falls, whether they're following the salmon. It's like the rhythm of the salmon is they jump up, or it's nerves. But we don't see this bear doing it anyplace else. So there's nothing wrong with this bear. It's just how it behaves on the lip of the falls.
I agree with that. Yeah, and it's almost like it just has like energy. It's anticipating the salmon. Uh, I think it's one of those just kind of like maybe nervous energies that they have when they're on the lip of the falls and they're anticipating the fish coming towards them. 910, she's one of those other bears that yeah, that we've seen do that a lot too. So yeah, that's our best guess with this. We don't think that there's necessarily anything wrong with this bear. Just one of those things that it does in this fishing spot. We don't really see them doing that on other places when they happen to be fishing. And 909, who's on the lip of the falls again, looking for her next catch, adding to that waistline. She doesn't do it, but again, yeah, her sister does it. So
Yeah.
so again, big mystery.
Did their mom do that?
Uh,
409?
no, she didn't. She did this thing where she would lift her paw up in the air, almost like again like a boxer getting ready to jab or something like that, or anybody cocking their arm getting ready to throw a ball. um, she would just kind of like hold her paw in the air like she's ready to catch the fish, um, but I don't remember her jerking her head up and down itself.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is
And
such a good day for the Bears, Naomi.
I know, it's amazing. I mean, this has been going on for quite a while with all those salmon jumping. It's great. But both 909 and 910 do that paw thing that their mother did, and always with the left paw, which is interesting. Just a little
Sometimes people do
anecdote.
do wonder if bears are left pawed or right pawed. I think I don't know if they are or not. There are places where brown and black bears are held in captivity. Maybe they were orphaned or something like that, and they're in a sense sanctuaries, but they're also research centers as well. And that would be like the place to try to test that out. Does a bear have a dominant paw, like a human has a dominant hand? So yeah,
Yeah. See,
I
she
don't know
just
that for
did
sure.
that. Yeah, she just did that. Reached out with her left paw to cradle the fish number
Yeah,
umpteen that she's caught.
our webcam audience could help to solve that riddle or that puzzle or that question by watching bears like 909 on the lip frequently and seeing how, like, if they grab a fish and they need to use one of their paws to help secure it, which one are they using, for instance? Is that their left paw or their right paw? So yeah, if you have the patience, you have a lot of time to watch the cameras. Maybe you can give us some answers on that. So yeah, tons to talk about today, Naomi. We didn't really get to talk a lot about bears interacting with one another because they're so well fed that they hadn't really much of a need to interact or compete for fishing spots or anything like that. But this is a rich day for them. They're really well fed, and I think we realize the richness of Bristol Bay when we get to see dozens of salmon jumping almost 12, 20 fish per second. Um, really wonderful. So I've been asking all of my co-hosts at the end of our broadcast, our play-by-plays, what can we do to help brown bears and salmon uh, in Katmai and elsewhere? So what do you have for us today?
Well, I think we. It's always climate change for me. This looks like Graser live. I'm gonna stop talking
Yes, live
about.
footage of Graser right at the end of our broadcast here.
Yeah, there she is with her cub, the healthy one.
Yeah, so yeah, again, if we can tackle climate change as fast as possible, that's going to help secure the future for bears and especially the salmon that they depend on. Because it's not necessarily that there won't be brown bears in Katmai if the climate ends up warming further. It's that the salmon runs are really at risk of changing and being impacted in a negative way. So if we want to help brown bears survive. We want high densities of bears. We want bears like Graser's cubs to have a future rich of, and full of salmon. And tackling climate change is one of the most impactful things that we can do for these bears. Naomi, I want to thank you for joining me. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say one of the things that was mentioned in that article about the smaller size of the salmon was the possible impact of warming oceans on the different salmon populations, and that could be affecting the size of the salmon. So, and we affect the temperatures of the ocean no matter where we are. So that's something for us to be conscious of. The more we're protecting the earth and the climate, the better we're protecting the bears in the Brooks River.
That's a great point. Katmai's physical landscape is well protected. It's protected by congressional law. It's protected by the National Park Service, and the indigenous cultures of the area that have close ties to the landscape itself. But no matter what, how well Katmai's physical landscape and freshwater landscape is protected, if the oceans aren't habitable for large numbers of salmon, then we're not going to see large numbers of salmon coming back to Brooks River. So food for thought. We wish Graser and her cub success. We're going to be looking for any evidence, of course, that the other cub is of its condition. We don't know right now. Again, just if you tuned in late, we haven't seen the other cub today, so we just don't know of its status. It wouldn't, if it's still injured. Of course, it is likely still injured, but if it's not feeling well enough to come down to the river, then that would clearly explain why it's not there. But we just don't know its status, unfortunately. But look for more updates, from rangers and Naomi and I over the next few days and next week if we have more information. Naomi, thanks so much for joining me today. It's been really fun to talk with you again on this play-by-play. We always have too much to talk about.
We do, and I hope people got some. I mean, it's been a very difficult week because people care about the bears, and they care about this particular bear. But I think let's find some solace in all that salmon jumping and those bears getting fat, and Graser here successfully getting salmon. So it's tough, but there were some good things we saw tonight.
Yeah, definitely a lot of reason for hope. And that's one thing that Ranger Susan was talking about earlier this week. My name is Mike Fitz with explore.org. Thanks for joining us today. My co-host has been Naomi Boak with the Katmai Conservancy. We'll talk to you again next week. More Bear Cam broadcasts coming up, play-by-plays, live chats as well. Have a great night, everybody. And until we talk to you again, enjoy the webcams.